Hello, DLD community. Welcome to our 23rd show. It will be an exciting session, a superstar session. Today we have two remarkable speakers, good old DLD friends. They are from completely different fields. Somehow not, you will see. But I know what they have in common. They have something very special in common. They are the best pattern recognizers I know. To recognize patterns is so important. It's the underlying concept in our communication, in our businesses, in our relations. Esther, you are a wonderful pattern recognizer in people and behaviors. You are possibly the best known relationship coach. You are the most famous couple therapist. Too bad I missed it to come to you. But
or not.
Maybe next slide. Esther Perel, she is a best-selling author for books on relationship, such as Mating in Captivity, as State of the Affair, very recommendable, State of the Affair. And she is the host with Kara Swisher, with our good friend. She had recently a wonderful Sway podcast, and her podcast is How is Work? She's looking at relationship dynamics at work, and lately couples under lockdown. Please check it out. Couples under lockdown. Esther, a huge thank you for being here, and thank you for your amazingly meaningful work to so many people I know and so many people around in this world. Our second guest today is Scott. Scott is also a good old friend of DLD. You made DLD a superstar thing. You made DLD big, Scott. Really, we thank you for so many appearances very early in the morning. At 8 a.m. in the morning, the room is full. It's overcrowded. Scott, you need no introduction into this DLD community. You're a very fast speaker and even a fast thinker, fast forward thinker. Your analyze of the market, of the business, of the tech business is so smart and so meaningful that you really changed the life of many people in terms of businesses. So I'm excited that two of you talking about relationships, business-wise and personal-wise, in times of Corona. Thank you for being here. Thank you for watching this show, and thank you for make our DLD life so rich. Esther, what is your what drives you in the moment?
This is Steffi's favorite question, is to really kind of do a pulse check and plug right in. What have you been thinking about? What animates you? What keeps you up? Definitely I've been thinking a lot about how this pandemic has affected all our relationships at work and at home. Specifically, how much it highlighted that the workplace has been much more than just a place where we work, but the psychological meaning that our workplace has for us. How the office for so long created a boundary between our home life and our professional worlds, a separation that prevented our couples from seeing the messiness of our kitchens or the tininess of our living rooms, and how much it was an equalizer, allowing us to choose what we want to share. Now we have this grand experiment called remote work. For some of us, this is a continuation of where we already were, except that we all would like the freedom to be anywhere, but we all long to belong somewhere. And that dynamic between the globalization and the nomadism, and on the other hand, the sense of rootedness and anchoring that we long for, the balance between security and adventure, is at the heart of how we are dealing at this moment with the pandemic. When it comes to work and remote, the things are quite obvious. Those who can and those who can afford it, primarily because this is really a class issue, love the hybrid, love spending more time with their children, more time at home, more closer to nature, etc. But there is a lot more of us that don't experience that. For us, for many women with young children, it is impossible to maintain work and be at home and thrive at the same time. For many of us who need to work outside of our homes in order to keep other people at home, essential workers of all sorts, the dynamic is very different. So I consider myself as a psychotherapist an essential worker, and I support a large group of therapists. But I am in my home. So it is different in terms of the physical boundary. It is very similar in terms of the emotional boundary. This is a time, I would say, where we have never been more physically apart and more emotionally connected. You do a Zoom session and you literally can see the people's bedrooms. You yourself may be sitting in a closet or in a bathroom in search of privacy. You know, home is an office, home is a gym, home is a school, home is a restaurant, home is a lover's den, home is a nursing home, and home is a quarantine headquarters. Our relationship to work has changed, but as a result, our relationship to our home and to the people that we live in that home has changed ever more. For many of us, I would say the mute button is the last boundary left. You know, you lift the mute button and you may have mayhem behind you, but as long as you're on mute, you know, there is that sensory border that allows us not to really know the chaos that sometimes we are actually living in. You know, I think COVID has created a unique moment, exactly the way you were talking, Steffi, about I miss you. I long for the connection. I long for the humor. I long for the serendipity, for the happenstance, for the chance encounter.
For the touch. I want to touch you.
Yes, we are touch hungry. We are majorly touch hungry. I mean, that is absolutely clear. Those who live with others, children, pets, other adults that they love to touch, it's one story. But many of us who live alone, it's a very different reality. And even when you have your close people to touch, you know, it's like you sometimes want to pierce through the screen and through the stillness and of the screen so that you can, it's the touch, the smell, the proximity, it's all the senses. It's all the senses which, you know, even now I'm looking at Steffi, but I'm not making eye contact. Yeah, and you know that I'm not. So mirror neurons are not aligning here. I'm desperately wanting to reach, and I am reaching because it's better than nothing, but it is not the same as the 3D.
But Esther, what are you telling people when they are stressed of this? How to cope with the stress of this, not touching, not being connected all the time? How should they cope with it?
So I think that there are a number of different things that are causing the stress, and it's probably important to name them. They're not in order of importance here, but what is causing us stress, besides what I just described, is also that we're living in a time of prolonged uncertainty. You know, usually when people think of disasters, they think of it in a 4-step sequence. You have the warning, you have the planning, you have the onslaught, and you have the post. The warning in the US, we barely had any. The planning, you know, became a kind of a summary of buying disinfectant and toilet paper and hoarding that. Then came the onslaught, but it isn't something that has passed. So this notion of, you know, how long is this going to last? How many more of this are we going to have? This kind of sense for a moment that there is a respite. And then you have this constant, you know, saga of the numbers. Every morning you wake up with these numbers.
When we were talking about this, Esther, we wanted to call this Eros and COVID, or the loss of the erotic. Can you define what you mean by erotic as it relates to our relationships in a period of COVID? Why have we lost the erotic? What is the erotic and why have we lost it?
Because I think that we have two fundamental sets of human needs that we straddle all the time. As individuals, societies, companies do the same thing. We need security, safety, anchoring, predictability, but we also need surprise, mystery, unknown, happenstance, chance encounters, serendipity. that which you cannot plan for, but that which takes you outside of the comfort zone, outside of the familiar, into new territory. Eros for me is, the modern definition is often a very sexualized definition, but what it really stands for is a life force. It's a sense of hopefulness. It's the antidote to death. It's the quality of aliveness, of vibrancy, of vitality that allows us to deal with adversity. It is the pleasure activism. It is the sense of joy. It's all of that. At this moment, we are primarily focused on maintaining our sense of security, stability, and risk avoidance. And that's what the pandemic requires of us. As a result, we lose that sense of spontaneity. Every spontaneous encounter could lead to a spontaneous contamination. So you constantly have risk awareness behind you, whereas what really allows you to flourish is when you can throw yourself, surrender into the unknown without fear, because there lies curiosity. You cannot be at the same time frightened and curious. And the erotic lives with curiosity.
And when you think about, so people are talking about what the enduring impacts of the novel coronavirus will be on industry, on society. When we look back on relationships, what do you think the one or two enduring impacts of the novel coronavirus will be on our relationships?
I think that this is a question that is completely developmentally determined. Those of us who have decades of another life behind us are a little bit on cruise control. We can go online and continue with the relationship that we've established. I'm talking to Steffi or to you. I don't know you as well, but I'm talking to Steffi. I already know her. I can build on my connection with her to kind of, amplify my screen experience. But if I'm a child and I have spent a child, and I'm going now from age 2 all the way to, to adolescence, but I have just spent major year on a screen, trying to learn, trying to articulate, trying to make sense of things, trying to socialize, trying to play. That is a fundamental experience that is going to shape me, because I don't have the background. This is new, and this is how I've learned it. And on the one hand, it helps a lot. It has given more than if we didn't have it. That is absolutely clear. But on the other hand, there is an experience of 3D. There's an experience of negotiating face to face. There's an experience of attunement, of looking at the experience that another person has with you. And that kind of relational awareness is greatly hampered when you live on a screen.
You brought up kids. You've talked a lot about relationships, marital and romantic relationships in a time of COVID. What I want to probe a little bit is sort of the parent-child relationship. You brought up kids, and I'll use, as I always do, I'm turning this to me. When I was commuting to New York from Florida, and I was gone Sunday through Thursday, when I came home, I was a luxury item because of my scarcity. And my kids used to run to the door and hug me, and it felt wonderful. And now, quite frankly, I'm around too much. And I think my kids kind of walk in and maybe I get a nod, but I get sort of that, oh, he's still here. And I find that in a weird way, while more time with family has been a good thing, I find in some ways, I don't want to say it's damaged the relationship, but it's made me less scarce and less special. Can you comment on how the parent-child relationship has changed in an era of COVID?
I think that's scarcity as an heightening of value is one thing, but the richness of experience also heightens value. Mm-hmm. So spending time together is just the commodity time. What determines it is what do you do in the time that you have with your kids. I have coached quite a few fathers, for that matter, in the recent months who for the first time were home in a long time, and in some way sometimes didn't really know how to have conversations with their kids, not just about the elections and politics and the virus and whatever else, but really about each other, about what it feels like to feel fragile, about what it feels like to suddenly be at home like this and to discover each other, about having walks together and conversations of the likes that they hadn't had in a long time. And when the fathers in this case took the chance, and just said, I'm going with this, they had very interesting surprises. Sometimes it's 2 out of the 3 children. The third one isn't too interested. You missed the boat, or you came at the wrong time, or come again in a few years. But often, at least 1 or 2 of them respond, it's a different relationship. It's a different quality of conversation. And having difficult conversations, having new conversations with your kids, be they 8, 12, or 17. I really think at every age you can have some of these conversations, particularly in a time like this. It's ripe. It's ripe with explorations that are not just about the chit chat of the everyday.
So let's move up one degree and talk about spousal relationships. The general kind of viewpoint is that good relationships have gotten better and bad relationships have gotten worse, that this is just an accelerant. There's got to be more to it than that. What are your observations around this crisis impact on spousal relationships?
I think that it varies all kinds. If you have to leave to go to work, and you are afraid when you come home that you could hurt your children or your partner, as I explored in Where Should We Begin? Couples Under Lockdown, where you have the woman going to the hospital in Sicily in the height of the pandemic, and she goes to work, she comes home, she takes a shower, she tries to make sure that she gets every dirt off her so that she can go and hug her children, but she's terrified of hugging them. Meanwhile, he is for the first time stepping into the role of the primary parent, which he has never done, and these are 3 young children. You get an entire rearrangement of the family structure. So that's one thing. And then you have the ones who really don't share rooms together anymore, and sometimes don't share the home together anymore, because one person is exposed on a daily basis and the other person, or younger or older or more vulnerable people, are not. So this is one thing that is really not a minority. This is a very important experience that is taking place now. Then what you have is, for the first time, you have a collapse of all your roles. You are at the same time a parent, a teacher, a lover, a friend, a trainer, a cook, everything in the same place. And you have lost the boundaries. We tend to live in highly localized ways. We change to go to certain places and some activities. We move to go and we commute to go to those places. All of that is collapsed right now. So you sit there with your partner. You're not just bringing work home. You literally are working together, not from home, but with home. And you see them interact with colleagues in ways that you never have. Sometimes you see them laugh. And you say, wow, I never knew that one anymore. That one is not the one who comes home. So attentive, so focused, so present, so charming. I get the leftovers. Sometimes you realize that they are actually acting in ways that you don't respect at all. Sometimes you notice that they take charge, that they take initiative. Whereas at home, you're constantly saying, will you take some charge here? I have to tell you everything you need to do. So you suddenly have an alternative role right in front of you, of your partner in their context. And you overhear it in ways that is very, that you don't hear nearly in the same degree. And if you want, I actually brought a little clip to show what happens when you put 2 partners together in a home. Let me play it to you, and you tell me what you hear. Paul, can we?
So oftentimes she gets angry at me for staying at my job. And she sometimes seems to set out to make my job appear miserable, as if to give me more motivation to leave. But because I can't leave tomorrow, it really makes it much harder to actually go into work.
I've tried to tone it down a little.
Right.
Well, what happens is that you both are so taking over the experience of the other person that you enter into a situation that we call empathic distress. Instead of being able to really be an empathic listener to the distress of the other, you take that distress in and you are unable to be empathic to each other, and you become angry to each other. And now each of you, on top of your miserable job situations, you have each other that you need to fight with as well.
We have done much fighting.
Much fighting. Much more than the last 18 years in the last 6 months.
This is an unreleased yet episode for How Is Work, where we, by the way, are casting for as well at this very moment, where this couple, you know, he's a physician. She has a secret job that he actually discovers for the first time, that for years that he didn't even know exactly what she was doing. And this concept of empathic distress is something that I've seen in quite a few couples as well. There's a few things, you know, the people who do well are often doing much better. They really appreciate the help they get from each other, the presence of each other, the fact that they're going through this together, and it's one more experience in life that they will have weathered together. Then you have a lot of people who are experiencing a kind of loneliness that is acute, which is the loneliness you feel when you're with others. There's one kind of loneliness you have when you're alone, but the one you feel when you're next to others with whom you feel you should connect and you don't connect. And every relationship at this moment, the cracks are going to shine through, but so will the light that shines through the cracks. I think it's really both and that we are experiencing in many households at this moment.
So Scott is gone for a second. He will come back. Probably his connection is not so good. So what, dear Esther, recommend you to fix it, to fix these cracks? Is it total openness? Is it sharing your feelings? Or what is the recipe from you?
So there's a few things that I think have been really helpful. I think it's a time to cut people a little bit of slack and to really understand that we walk around with this sense of acute stress at this moment. And that means that the level of irritability is strong. And when I say stress, I don't just mean tension. I mean sadness. I mean grief. I mean anger. I mean restlessness. I mean hopelessness. It's much more inchoate, the kind of grief that we're feeling, because not everybody is grieving the actual death of persons, which millions of us are doing as well. But what we are really grieving has to do with what we call ambiguous loss. It's the loss of so many intangible elements to our normal life that we can hardly identify that what we're missing. It's when people talk about the loss of the lives that they have lived, or the loss of the boundaries between work, school, home, and more, or the loss of plans that they were going to get married or travel or celebrate birthdays or anniversaries, the loss of the predictable future, the loss of trust in leadership. It's those kinds of losses. So when you live with someone, you know, I call it the loss of a kind of a loss of certain normalcy, as David Kessler talks about it, the fear of economic toll, the loss of connection, and the grief in the air. So when you know that, try to be a little kinder to the persons that you live with. When they do something nice, it's a very important sweet distinction. Instead of just saying, thank you for bringing me the coffee, you tell them, thank you for being so thoughtful. So instead of highlighting the task, you actually highlight the person. And you show appreciation for the person, which generally gives the other person a sense that they matter. And when we feel that we matter, it changes the sense of meaning that we have about the relationship that we are in. That's a very small one, but it goes a long way.
But this recipe, Esther, what you just give to empower and to say, yes, it's good. And this helps in education, it helps in business, it helps always to affirm people.
Everything I'm going to say here is true in intimate relationships as it is true in the work context. Absolutely. I think that the golden rules of relationships apply to all relationships.
Yeah.
Young and old, you know, hierarchical and lateral. I think one of the things that has really helped in a time like this is what Viktor Frankl used to call the concept of tragic optimism. You know, the ability to maintain hope and to find meaning despite the inescapability of pain or loss or suffering. So instead of thinking everything will be all right, we're going back to the way things were, that kind of, sense of mastery of, we're still in charge of the world we knew. Or on the other side, that complete sense of unraveling. Tragic optimism says, I can't deal with what is happening in terms of the causality, but my reaction to it is my ultimate sense of freedom, how I choose to respond to this pandemic. One of the most important resources people have is connection. It's the reaching out. If you need help, ask for it. And if you can offer help, reach out. It's reach in and reach out, basically. These are the two movements at this moment. There's nothing more powerful as an antidepressant than to do for others. And others is your neighbor next door who just is a little too old to go to the supermarket at this point. It's open your eyes. It's not like you have to go and donate to foundations or to organizations. It's just the people around you. It changes our sense of helplessness when we can do something for others who are more vulnerable than us. So that's another big one that has helped a lot. And I would put as a last one, just for now, because there are many others, is to not give up on celebrations. It's very important to people to continue to celebrate in the midst of a crisis or in the midst of a pandemic. People in concentration camps, like my parents, understood that. They fell in love in the concentration camps. People continue to, it makes us feel human. It makes us connected to the future and to a sense of hopefulness when we continue to celebrate. Well, if you're locked up, if you're in confinement, dress up and go downstairs.
Yeah, I agree. I always agree. Does this have something to do with the very fashionable word of resilience?
See, I think that the issue of the word resilience is that it is often misunderstood as if it's people going and tapping into their internal capacities. And that is only a partial definition of the word resilience. Resilience is also tapping into your general resources. And that means tapping into your legacy capacities. What stories did you grow up with of adversity that your family or your community has been able to overcome? These stories also live inside of us. Resilience also needs to include the word joy and pleasure. Pleasure is a form of activism that helps with healing trauma. It isn't just some little addendum that you get at the end of the process. It is actually a claiming of a sense of deserving and self-worth. So often when people talk resilience, it's a very serious concept. They can weather the things, they can bounce back, they can come out of it stronger. That's pieces of it. But there is also, the most important question as a therapist facing issues of trauma and resilience is always this. Why for some people, the big hits break them and they can never get back up? And for other people, similar big hits is what built them and gave them the sense of determination and their joie de vivre. Go figure. I mean, there are answers, but it is one of the most interesting questions about why for somebody, this is the thing that will just fracture me, and this is the thing for another person that will actually inspire me.
Yeah, it's interesting. Back to your neighbor. There are persons who are very open, they go to the neighbor and say, can I help you? But there are other persons who are afraid to touch the boundary between the neighbor and themselves. What would you recommend them to openness?
Yes, I think it's a great question. Look, I think everybody here today can ask themselves this fantastic question. When you think about the importance of relationships in your life and the messages that you received about relationships, were they central or were they peripheral? Were you raised for autonomy and self-reliance and needing to figure things out on your own, which therefore means that you won't necessarily ask for help, nor necessarily always offer help? Or were you raised for loyalty and with a sense of interdependence, that fundamentally, ontologically, you're never really alone? There will always be someone, sometimes for you, and sometimes you are that person for others. when people don't offer, it's often because they also think that they themselves shouldn't get, that they are there to figure out life as it is in front of them by themselves, because nobody will ever know as well as you do yourself. Nobody can ever really help you. You only have your own two legs to stand on. And when you live with that mentality, it's a belief system. You often apply the same belief system to others. I happen to think that it's a belief system with limits. I think that we never actually just stand on our own two legs. There are always going to be, in one form or another, angels that will appear in our lives of all sorts. And on occasion, be that angel. At the same time, seriously, in terms of the level of heaviness that people are currently feeling, a kind of a depressive state a little bit, a sense of guardedness the whole time, don't just go to the neighbor and say, can I help you? Just bring the food. Just bring the package that is at the post office. Just, put the stuff in the elevator for them. Whatever it is, just do it. Don't make the other person even have to articulate it. It's not complicated. Food is probably one of the most immediate. It's sustenance, but it's also nurturing, but it's also awareness. It's also feeding. I think in a moment where we are constantly dealing with risk assessment and risk tolerance, find a few people, but think beyond the first line. Just think beyond it.
And do it in small steps.
It can be the children of your, it can be the children of your friends as well. I mean, families are sometimes choking at this point, 4 or 5 people just with each other the whole time. You have kids, you don't have kids, you're in a different life stage. Take advantage of where you are at, and just on occasion, call a kid once a week with whom you're reading or with whom you're playing. Offer an hour of babysitting to somebody who has 2 little ones when yours are older. It's all of that. 1 hour like that you are reading to one of their kids changes the life of another family sometimes. And it's in life is lived in the details.
Absolutely. Esther, are you an optimist?
I should be an optimist, given that I'm the child of my parents. I think I probably would say I'm a tragic optimist. Let me put it
What
like
is the tragedy?
No, I will give you a better answer. If I really look at myself, I would say the word that applies to me most is that I am counterphobic. What does that mean? It means that I go from states of thinking everything will be all right, nothing can happen to me, to then doing things, to then thinking, what did I just do? Oh my God, I'm going to be so punished for this. I go from kind of a sense of magic perfection to complete tragedy. That is the seesaw.
This sounds like a guilty optimist.
Okay.
My dear audience, you should have seen Esther. We had a dinner with our friend Maria last year, and then we went to a discotheque where we had the DLD party. And you should have seen Esther's energy, Esther's power to enter this dance floor. I was so much envying. You were taking the occasion and lived the full life. And this is a quality, I think it's so necessary that we try to find it in ourselves too. How do you consult people to accept full life?
So it's very interesting that you're mentioning dance, because dance is a particular form of artistic expression that is fundamentally different from painting, writing, composing, playing music, you name it. You can cry while you listen to music or play music. You can cry while you write poetry. You can cry while you paint. You cannot cry while you dance. The body that is crying, the body that is in pain, is a body that is contracted, that is collapsed. And you cannot dance in this position. So by definition, when you dance, it opens up a different channel and a different energy and a different mood. So I often use dance with my patients. I think it is so important, that sense of freedom that people slowly can learn to develop with their body. And I'm not talking about dancing in this formal choreographic way. I'm talking about a sense of being in one's body, feeling at the same time the ability to feel safe and playful. I think that at the moment like this, and this is where Scott was just getting off, was that disasters are relationship accelerators, always. They throw the superfluous overboard, they heighten your sense of priority, and particularly they heighten the sense of mortality. Life is short. When you live with the awareness that life is short, which you always know, but you don't always have it right in front of you. You have it in front of you when you've just avoided an accident. You have it in front of you when you hear about somebody else dying. You have it in front of you when you live with a pandemic. The awareness is always there, but suddenly it is right here. And you then say, I don't have much time to waste. Therefore, let's get married, let's have children, let's move, let's change job. It's all those things you've made meaning to do. Or you say, life is short, I've been waiting long enough and I'm out of here. And I no longer want to be with friendships or partnerships or love relationships that are no longer satisfying to me. That propulsion is very much what is happening at this moment. So a lot of my work is to decipher with people, what are the priorities for you now? And do you want to act on them?
Yeah, interesting. Esther, one of your podcasts is How's Work? What made you to write this or to produce this?
To do this podcast? So, where should we begin? Is the podcast that I've now done 4 seasons, and it features anonymous couples in live 3-hour sessions, raw, unedited, so that you would know what is happening in the neighbor's house. How do other couples deal with the big issues of relationships at this moment? How do they navigate the complexities of modern love? How is work basically said, our relationships, the quality of our relationships that determines the quality of our life, this takes place at work as well. Work today is not just a place where people go to make a living. Work is a place for identity, for belonging, for meaning, for continuity. Work has taken on completely new meanings that used to be only reserved in the past for artisans and artists. And I wanted to bring us into these multiple workplaces, colleagues, co-workers, co-founders, family businesses. We're making the 2nd season now for How Is Work. And it goes from a gallerist and one of her artists to 2 lobbyists to a Black supervisor who is negotiating the salary with a white heterosexual woman, to a couple that is owning a gym and that is now having to work from home, do trainings in their homes, to the doctor that you just heard with his wife and who are dealing with issues of moral injury about how he has dealt his work as a physician during the pandemic. To twin brothers who have been entrepreneurs together. It's really, really rich. So we have a few more episodes now that we are casting. And so we invite basically people who are dealing with dilemmas of relationships in the workplace, conversations that need to be had with people that they need to be having it with. Because very often at work you have conflicts, but you're talking about it with somebody else. This is an entrepreneurial community, DLD. 65% of startups fail because the relationship between the co-founders goes bust. The relationships matter. Many good ideas get thrown out because of that. So how do we bring people in the midst of their relationship dilemmas to address them with each other as it relates to their work life is at the center of our human concerns at this moment.
Interesting, Esther. I'm asking myself the questions of I started the conversation with the underlying patterns. Aren't you bored about it's always the same, or are you still surprised about the multitude of complexity and of problems?
Every song has a beginning, a middle, and an end. Do you stop listening to music?
Yeah, that's a good answer. No, never.
Never, because it's always somewhat different, because there are even the ones that are similar, you love to sing them over and over. No, I think that the complexity of human relationships is enormous. The patterns are recognizable. And yes, I really enjoy looking at the structural pieces, because once you understand that much of what people grapple with in their relationship is not about the content. It's not about the specific topic. In fact, let me go to a pattern that I think is really fascinating and you will relate to with work. When people are dealing with conflicts, work or home, but let's use work since it's DLD. And this appears constantly in the podcast as well. There is the manifest and there is the implicit of what people are talking about. People may be arguing about who was at a meeting and why was somebody not consulted. But bottom line, underneath this, there are about 3 major dynamics that play themselves out around conflict. One is power and control. I wasn't invited in the meeting means what? That somebody else gets to make the decision, that somebody else's priorities matter more than me. Power and control. The second one is trust and closeness. Do you have my back? I thought we were in this together. How dare you go on your own? That is such a sense of betrayal. Trust and closeness is fundamental. That's what is being argued about underneath the specific little thing for which, in the topic that was chosen for this occasion. And the third one is respect and recognition, is integrity, a sense of worth, a sense of being acknowledged for my integrity, for my humanity. Take 20 topics that people argue at work, and you will pretty much see that you can put them. This is about power, control, trust. This is about recognition, respect, etc. That's the patterns. It's like playing pool. When you want to kick one ball, you need to find which is the other one that you need to touch in order to direct this one. And that's like a chess game. And everybody who plays chess wants to play again. And it's not like you get bored.
Yeah. But now we don't want to, in times of artificial intelligence, we don't want to play chess anymore. We want to play Go, because AlphaGo, made our human obsolete. I think many people, human thoughts and our intuition obsolete. Demis Hassabis, with his amazing work, is on the rim of counterfighting, or not counterfighting, of empower computers to be more intuitive than humans. Or not, you can say more intuitive, but empower computers to beat intuition, human intuition.
Look, I've had this conversation multiple times. Data is a form of knowledge. Data and intuition are not the same form of knowledge. It's one thing to program a machine to recognize a pattern, but then what do you do? And the fact that I see the same pattern doesn't mean that I'm going to each time do the same thing. I don't do 2 sessions the same way. If you listen to the podcast, since it is me working, you will see what people continuously say is, I thought you were going here, and suddenly you went in a completely different direction that I could not have anticipated. Well, that is a sense, that is being in the moment, that is responding to what's in front of you, and that demands a very different kind of sensitivity, knowledge, artistry, spontaneity, that is in addition to the pattern recognition. So with all due respect to data, so far anyway, the data can recognize structures, but nuance, ambiguity, surprise, mischief, playfulness, i.e. everything on the side of the erotic imagination, right? This was going to be about the loss of the erotic under coronavirus time. This, at this point, is still primarily in the hands of humans.
That you said this, And let's hope that it will be last for a long time. I see Melissa. Melissa, you're the question person.
I actually have already so many questions from the audience.
Please go ahead.
For you, jumping back a little bit, stepping back very simply, but we got a lot of questions. Basically, you spoke about loneliness, this feeling of loneliness, whether you're completely alone or with other people, but they want just basic tools in moments where you really feel, a lot of us have moments where we feel this incredible despair, this purposelessness, this feeling of anxiety, this feeling of, they want to know in that very moment some basic tools to just get away from this mindset.
I think that the first thing I want to say is it's normal. There is nothing wrong with the fact that people in this moment are feeling alone or lonely or disconnected or longing or sad or grieving or irritable. I think that this is the absolute response to have, given what we are going through. And what we're going through is a pandemic that is also an environmental disaster, that has also been tied to an economic collapse, at least in the United States for many people, that is also been tied to one of the most contentious elections that we have ever known, etc. Whoever is kind of going around jubilating would probably, in my mind, be out of touch with what's going on around us. So this is the first thing. Is really to normalize it, to accept it, not to fight it. Then the second thing is to really think creatively, and that's outside of the box. And to think creatively here is to say, who are the people that I want to spend this time with? And then basically go and create a pod. It can be 2-3 families. It can be, a bunch of different people who are living on their own and move in together and live together, so that you get to cook together, you get to clean together, you get to be alone when you want, and you get to be with other people when you need to. I can't emphasize this enough, but our individualistic society has really trained too many of us to have to solve collective problems in a personal way. Collective problems demand collective solutions. They're not meant to be handled by one individual. So that's probably the most important thing. Take walks with people. Don't just sit at a screen, and especially not on Zoom. Take walks, because when the body moves, you have a complete different energy and a different state of mind, and therefore a different set of feelings. Walk with people. Do things at a distance. I give you, this is a very small personal set of examples of what I did. They fit me. They don't necessarily, they really are not recipes. They're just ideas. I knew in the beginning of the pandemic in March that I'm not very good at taking initiatives to stay physically active by myself. That doesn't work for me. And to register for classes online ain't gonna work for me. So I called 1 or 2 friends and just said, do you want to just do 8 o'clock in the morning and do a yoga thing together, do whatever physical activity we do together. And in the end, we became a group of 10, 12 people. Sometimes 6 people. We have done this 4 times a week for 9 months. And it's not the yoga, it's not the exercise, it's the cohesive force of 8 o'clock in the morning. We all have to get up and to do this, and then to chat with each other, to check in on each other, to see how everybody is doing. This is taking place over 3 continents, some with families, some by themselves, some younger, some older. It's such a powerful glue. And then a few of these people began to go and hike together or swim together in the summer when they were able to meet. Physical activity and nature and people, all 3 elements together, is really one of the most important things. A book club, a movie club, so that you don't just watch things and sit there with your Netflix, watch something, then have a gathering where you discuss it. So there is a kind of a structure around these kind of experiences that have no boundaries, that have no context. It's really about creating boundaries, rituals, and routines. It's these 3 things that have fundamentally left the structure of our lives. Some of them involve alone, and some of them involve with other people.
But as we go forward, for example, do you think this pandemic is going to change for good how we do relationships? For example, somebody asked from Australia, do you think this period will lead to the natural deselection of certain social traits and qualities we possess as a humanity?
Say that again. I'm sorry. Say it again.
Do you think this period will lead to a natural deselection of certain social traits and qualities we possess as humans? Do you think we're going to change after this, and it's, you know, in the new normal?
I think that to me, these are questions that you can kind of predict pieces of the future, but then the future basically tells you every place you went wrong. Look, people have had to negotiate safe sex. Now they're negotiating safe socializing. They have to ask questions to each other in ways and in times that are much sooner than we would normally do. So you suddenly are asking people, where is your family? Who is in your family? What kind of relationships do you have with your family? Does your family assess the world in the same place? You know, a conversation about a mask at this point is a conversation about 10 other things. It speaks politics, it speaks gender, it speaks medicine, it speaks health issues. I mean, you just have to ask one small question and it's a portal to 10 other subcategories. So that's one thing that is going to change. I think that the ease with which we, you know, here's a piece of the future. Nobody who watched a movie in 2019 where you see people in a movie going to a party, sitting in a car together, sitting at a table together, completely carefree, could have imagined the kind of stress that these situations would induce in us right now. It was a future that was impossible to predict. Now, when you watch those movies, you say, oh my God, I lived like that no longer than a year ago. I was that person that was doing all of these things, every one of us, you know. And then we look at what has happened in our bodies, in our necks, jaw, you know, where we hold the tension, shoulders, back, etc. And it gives us a sense of the future. The future is actually right now in relation to where we were not too long ago. The specifics of what will change, I think that the most important things will be to watch children actually more than adults. I think the notion that for the first time so many people have lost family members that died alone, that whose hand they couldn't touch, whose they couldn't sit next to, has completely changed the sense of how people live and what needs to happen for those who are lucky not to be alone in a hospital room, for example. So it's from the beginning and at the end of life that I think the big changes will take place. Work also will change. Of course, everybody wants a hybrid. People want 9 to 5, but they don't want it necessarily in the office. They want it not measured by hours. They want it measured by productivity. Lots of those things are going to change as well.
That's exactly another question, because a lot of people going forward, for example, now, of course, some of us, like in our office, we have some people who are much more comfortable doing things remotely and some people who feel more comfortable being in the office. Right now, we don't have set rules. People can apply it how they feel more comfortable. But when this pandemic ends, this is going to have an end. So going in organizations, how are they going to be able to find a balance between the people who feel they're more productive working from home and people who actually want to come to the office and work from here? So,
because I think you have to distinguish between the tasks that can be digitalized and the tasks that can be done remote, and the things for which you need conversation, serendipity, people. I mean, when we negotiate remote work, it's not just negotiating who is more comfortable working from home. Who's going to pay the heat bill when I work from home is a question we should ask as well. If my home becomes my office, do you pay my bill for the heating? How are you going to deal with hiring me, with firing me, with raising my salary, with promoting me, when all of these things are done remote? How am I even going to find who is going to be the person who becomes my ally and my mentor if I don't have a hallway to walk down to the coffee machine with? You know, there are the things that can be systematized and digitalized and automatized. But there's a whole lot of other things that happen at work that have way other psychological meanings and productivity meanings and creativity meanings that we haven't even begun to think about. So we may not go into the office, we may go and take a walk in the woods, but we will need to meet people one way or another.
That's also a lot of the questions right now coming in, is how right now people can meet people, or the future of dating. How is this going to shift, or how is it going to be? Are we going to be doing everything through, we got lots of questions on how, if it's going to be all through apps, and how is this future going to be of human connection, but it's going to be somehow through apps, through technology, and not through human touch.
I mean, there's a lot of very interesting things happening in two directions. On the one hand, people are actually spending more time on video and less time just, swiping back and forth. They actually are interested in meeting, and the conversation in many instances are more robust and earlier than they would be in a kind of a time when you can go, swipe, go meet, and then decide afterwards what you want to do with it. There's a kind of a risk assessment that you have to do up front. The degree to which people are going to primarily meet new people through apps versus through small circles, I don't think that at this point we have a sense. The apps have been thriving. The apps have been thriving because the human need to connect isn't going away. And people will find a way to make the devices work for them. And they will lament certain things that they have lost, and they will welcome things that they didn't know existed.
Actually, talking about this, somebody asked, do you think that communicating virtually might sometimes even allow for another deeper, less guarded type of intimacy? Now that we're communicating so much virtually, does it allow for another less guarded type of intimacy, in your opinion?
I think that when people write a letter, they often speak much more open, more transparent, deeper, less, basically writing in general. Let's put it like that. Writing invites an experience in which I am at the same time with myself, inside myself, and with somebody else when I'm writing to you. But you're not there. So I write to the person I'm imagining. And that allows me to often be much more open. And so technology offers other means of writing like that. Phone, I think that there is a difference if it is synchronous and asynchronous. If you are on the phone and you have the immediate response and you hear the breath and you hear the whimper and you hear the smile, you're in a different kind of communication than when it's asynchronous. I write to you, I wait, you respond to me. To me, for some people, yes, it will not being sitting in front of someone who's looking into the eyes is an easier way. For some people, parallel play is easier. We both like fishing, or walking, two people looking forward, or driving in a car. There's a lot of settings that have often invited some people to be more open, more vulnerable, more revealing of themselves than the face-to-face. There's side-to-side, there's face-to-face. Some people thrive on the face-to-face, interpenetration of the eyes, locking into each other. And some people find this safer and therefore more vulnerable, more amenable to a certain kind of vulnerability. And I think that everybody has a little bit of each. Some of us prefer one or the other, but I wouldn't put one above the other.
Mm-hmm. Very good. And another question is, do you have any mental apps that you think are helpful for times like these, that people are coping, mental health apps that people would help people cope with uncertainty during these times?
I mean, one of the main mental health apps, interestingly, is Where Should We Begin, my own podcast, and especially the season of the couples under lockdown. I think because it was Sicily, Germany, New York, Nigeria, people really got a sense of the acuteness of some of the experiences.
This is life. This is our world.
Exactly.
Sometimes it works, sometimes we have some difficulties in connection. But connection, we all should have very close connection to each other. And so far as I followed wonderful Esther in her talk, she teaches us to deal with our connections, to get into connections. Every moment counts. Every moment is important. Every moment with your neighbor, with the connections with your neighbor, with your partner, with your colleague, with all these people. Every connection, every moment counts. Sorry, Esther, I just wanted to be the Pausenclown. Now I can't hear you.
Sorry, I said you wanted to be the connective tissue as I went to open the door because I am working from home, with home.
No, that's okay. I think our community, it's so important that we realize this is not a perfectly scripted event. Scott had a bad connection. Okay, so let's take the moment and have a closeness with Esther. It's in this moment, it's very good. Thank you, Esther. Thank you for being
very happy.
so reactive and so thoughtful, and give us so wonderful, even modest advice. You know, it's you are not teaching us with rules and laws, and you're touching us very humble and very, very deep. This is amazing.
Thank you very much.
I'm touched, and I hope you, dear colleagues and dear friends and dear DLD community wherever you are, that you're touched by Esther's thoughtful talk. I think it's important that we allow ourselves to be the selves who we are. And Esther gave us good advice for this journey. Thank you, Esther.
My pleasure. My pleasure. Goodbye to all DLD community, and I'll be back with Scott another time.
Yes, I count on this. Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.